Sometimes I think I will get closure from it, because going into the home and seeing so many other people in this situation, you realise that actually it affects everybody. It's indiscriminate. It affects everybody. But then I'd think, I can't cope without him, and couldn't he have just had something else? But then you don't get that choice, do you? My name is Paula and my father has Alzheimer's.
Just finished our first mountain, the Three Peaks, doing in memory of my Opa for raising money for Alzheimer Society. Raised about £700 so far. We've got 2 more peaks to go.
My father is Robert Hellier Scurrer, and he was born in 1931 in Bradford. He has an identical twin brother, Henry. My father married my mum, Jacqueline, and they were married for over 40 years. They met at a dance hall in Manchester at Bellevue, and I think they had a lot of fun, because one week Henry would go and my father wouldn't go, and my mum wouldn't understand why Robert wasn't talking to him, because Henry hadn't met my mother, so it was usual stuff that identical twins would get up to. So he was married for a very long time. She was the love of his life. Well, my father's always been very much interested in travelling. He had an avid desire to acquire knowledge. He was a soldier in Egypt as his part of his national service. And he actually spent 4 years in Egypt. I'd seen that Dad had been deteriorating with his memory, and so we'd had lots of appointments at the hospital, and then it was in 2013 that we actually finally went and got the diagnosis. And I do remember it very, very vividly, because I am very emotional, and I felt that I was losing a friend. I started crying, as you can imagine, because here is this supremely intelligent and cultured man, and you knew it was going to be taken away from you. And he turned to me and he just said, I don't know why you're crying. He said, don't cry for me. I've had the best life ever. I've been round the world 3 times, and I don't have any regrets, and I don't want you to cry for me, because I've seen off people who were much younger than me many years ago. I was devastated, because this is a friend. I was losing a close friend.
So about 10 hours in now, not far till we get to Scaffold Lake. It's been quite a horrible car journey, quite cramped. Yeah. How are you feeling, James?
Horrible.
My name is Darren, and my Opa had Alzheimer's. One of my favourite memories of him was the fact that every time I used to visit in Cape Town, he would take me hiking in the mountains. There were several trails we used to do, which some led to views over Cape Town, others were waterfall trails where we'd see 3 or 4 waterfalls. We used to go with his dog, Sasha, and at the end of every hike we used to go to this big lake in the middle of the mountains and go for a swim. So I was about the age of 7 or 8 when he got diagnosed. That's looking back at it. When I was at that age, I had no idea what was really going on. I wasn't really in the loop. My parents didn't really tell me. So I didn't really understand why he was getting confused, angry and upset. Just kind of what's happening. I was told the classic child thing that my Opa was very ill, and that was about it. I think it was probably a good 5 years into it before my parents told me what was really going on. So on the 4th of July this year, a group of friends and myself will be partaking in what is known as the Three Peaks Challenge. This involves climbing the 3 highest mountains in England, Scotland and Wales. We're starting off with Ben Nevis in Scotland, driving down to Scafell Pike in the Lake District, and then doing Snowdon in Wales. The challenge of this is including drive and climb time to finish in a 24-hour period. The reason we're doing this challenge is to raise money for Alzheimer's Society.
My name is Teresa and my husband has Alzheimer's. He grew up at Mapley in Nottingham. A family of, there's 8 children in the family, so it's a nice big happy family, really beautiful. So we met at Basford Hall College doing English O-level because we both failed it. He used to be a supervisor and he needed better qualifications, and I had to get better qualifications for the job I wanted. He was the loudmouth at the back of the classroom, and I thought, oh, if he'd shut up, it really would be good. And then I ended up marrying him in 1971. So we've been married 47 years. In 2004, the family and myself realised he couldn't remember things very well. He wouldn't remember where he'd parked the car, just minor details. But he denied it totally, that it was happening. He still is to this day in total denial of having any dementia. So I had to say I was going to the doctors to even get him to the doctors. It got a lot worse in 2010. I think I got him to the doctors again, and they did, I think they did the scans then, and they did sort of realise that it was Alzheimer's. And they didn't actually say it to Colin, because I think they'd realised he wasn't going to accept it. They know what they're doing, don't they? They're really very, very good. And so it came in a letter saying that, because he'd had the scans and what have you, and he ripped the letter up. That I couldn't stick it back together again because it was in that many pieces, you couldn't believe it. So to talk about it with him wasn't on. He'd get aggressive about it.
With Alzheimer's, the grieving process is literally the most gradual grieving process of any illness ever, because we lost her gradually over that 10-year period. By the time 5 years was even gone, she wasn't herself anymore. My name's Heather, and my grandma had Alzheimer's. Her name was Joyce Griffiths. She was from the Wirral, which is near Liverpool, and she was a radiographer. So she did x-rays for people in hospitals and stuff. And she died in 2016, I think, a couple of years ago. My mum just kind of always knew, my mum's a biologist, she knows a lot about medicine and stuff. She could tell that she had it, she knew the signs. So my mum obviously told me and my sister, I think she has this, but because she didn't believe it was more a battle with her to convince her that she did have it, she needed to go get it checked out. So it was more my mum telling us she had it and telling her she had it.
I was told he'd be all right to live on his own for 18 months, but in actual fact, he ended up staying there a lot longer, which was his wish. And I found that very interesting, really, because my initial reaction was, I need him close to me. I want him close to me. I want to be there for him as a daughter, to support him in a way that he'd supported me. And I wanted him to come and live with me and my family, which was quite a way away from where he lived, away from his home. And in the end, he didn't want to do that. And I was upset about it. And I did actually speak to the Alzheimer's Society, and they were quite helpful when I rang up, because they explained to me, why do you want him to come and live with you? Is it to do with you, or is it because it's what he wants? And actually it was what I wanted. And they said people with Alzheimer's like to have something that is familiar to them. So because he'd been in that house in Cheshire since 1982, I had to actually accept, and actually I accepted it quite readily when it had been explained to me that this was the best place for him to live. He was 6 foot, over 6 foot, and he lived in a cottage. And in all the years that he lived there, he never banged his head once because he was so used to ducking under the beams. And he still did that even with Alzheimer's because it was familiar to him. And that's something that I hadn't realised.
My name's Will. We're doing this walk through Alzheimer's UK, and at the minute it's going pretty well. Everyone was mocking me for wearing a vest, but now James has got one going as well.
I'd hidden the keys and I'd gone out because I only went out for 2 hours once a week. That's all I was able to get out because I've got no backup family really. And I had to call I went into the police station and they were really helpful. And there was Colin, who could drive, who was still insured and he was still able to drive, but he didn't know where he was going. So I knew he was safe on the road, but then again you're thinking, is he going to have an accident? And the stress levels for me were quite high. The police suggested we went to his childhood home and then worked back to the other homes we'd lived in Nottingham, and there he was sat outside his childhood house in Mapley and didn't know what to do because he'd knocked on the door and nobody was there. And I was so relieved to see him, but I could have killed him at the same time for giving me a heartache. The mental health team at Notts County Council were brilliant. And I was trying to get Colin to go into just a couple of hours each day, or 1 day a week, you know, into sort of some sort of care situation, just to give me relief for a couple of hours. And they came to assess him, and he was very aggressive to them. And they sent for someone else in higher authority. And that's when they said, you know, I'm sorry, but, you know, we've got a real problem here. And they came and they sectioned him. And that was the worst day of my life. Because I had to go with Colin. We didn't want the police involved. This is where I go into tears. And they took him, and that was really awful, and the guilt, just off this scale. But they did say it's going to get bad, but it won't get worse. And they were right. If anybody else has to go through it, it will get better. It's just going through that tunnel. You do come out the other end.
I remember when we used to go visit, it became less and less going for the walks with him, and a lot more time that he'd be just sitting around, kind of trying to pay attention to conversations, it seemed, where he'd maybe pot around in the garden but never really go out with he wouldn't take me out like to the mountains or anything. We wouldn't go to old beach house, things like that, so things kind of just stopped happening. I think it was very hard for my grandmother because they'd been married by that point for 40 or so years and lived in the same house for the majority of that time. But a few years into when he got diagnosed, it became kind of clear that they couldn't maintain the house they were living in. So with my parents and my grandmother, they had the hard task of trying to move into a care home or a care village, which was very difficult because him not knowing what was going on, having such long-rooted time in this house, it was really a big change and quite a difficult change for him.
I think the hardest thing is when she forgot who we were. First she forgot like who me and my sister were, like she'd always think that I was my mum and stuff like that. And then she'd started forgetting like who my mum was, which was probably the worst thing because my mum was the person that like stood by her through all of it and like helped her like move from the Wirral to High Wycombe where we live. And then once she forgot who she was, because my mum spent like every day with her, that's probably one of the hardest things.
I think that Alzheimer's for me I've been devastated by it, to be honest. It's been devastating because there's very little support. You really feel that you're floundering. You feel, because this is happening for the first time, and particularly as an only child, I haven't wanted to burden my children with my own anxieties about how sad I've been about it, because it's devastated me to see that you lose this man who's been such an inspiration to you, and he's disappearing and he's doing things that you can't possibly imagine he would ever do. because he doesn't know and because the illness has taken over, I would say that it's had a very negative effect on me mentally, because you never expect to see that. When I first used to go and see him, I was hopeless. In fact, I'm almost embarrassed really, because I would just cry all the time, because I felt, you know, because my dad's been such an inspiration to me, to see him in this reduced state was devastating. And I would cry every time I went to see him. I tried to keep it away from him, but sometimes it was impossible. And I remember him turning to me one day and just saying, and it was out of the blue, he said, "Oh, don't cry." And that made me cry even more, because he'd said that. But now I can go and see him, because I've realised that I'm very, very lucky that I still have him. I can go and see him. And because I don't think about the past, I don't think about what he was, I just think about, I'm lucky to have him now, I don't cry.
Do you want a break?
No, I'm fine, I'll carry on.
I do think it is a hard disease for both the individual and probably the family around it. The support to the families, I think, is quite limited, because when you go to the doctor's appointment, it is all about the patient, whereas there's little done to see how a family copes and suffers when such a loved one is almost withering away.
My sister's been a great support to me, and Colin's brothers and sisters, they've been very, very good. I'll say at this stage that there are 8 in the family, and 6 of them have had some sort of dementia or are suffering with it at the moment. 4 of them with Alzheimer's, 1 with Lewy body who died, and then there was motor neuron disease as well. So it's been, they've been very understanding. They're a close family, so especially from a couple of members, they've been brilliant. Colin had a chance of going into some sort of, with the city hospital, you know, there's monitored him over the years. He wasn't going to accept he'd got the disease, was he? So we couldn't join in. It would have been wonderful, because if they'd got involved with the rest of the family, we've got to make progress on this, haven't we? And that would have helped. He wasn't going to do it.
About to start the last mountain. It's been a rather long day. Pretty tired, didn't get that much sleep in the car. But the sunset looks nice and the route should be quite nice.
I really think that somebody was either watching over me, I don't know, guardian angel or my mum, when we found the place at Bootham Manor, because to be perfectly honest, since he went to Bootham Manor, I've not looked back. I've not had 1 minute's worry, because it was obvious to me very early on that the level of care at this particular home was second to none.
Hi, my name's Kerry and I am a carer for people with dementia and Alzheimer's.
Hello.
It can be quite demanding, but that is also down to the levels of either the dementia or the Alzheimer's. Some days can be harder than others, because we all have bad days ourselves anyway. So some days you think like, it's very draining, and you might feel you're not helping somebody, but you have helped them. But yeah, it is quite a demanding job. It's not for everybody. Sometimes you can get negative because, and I think it's more of the family not having an understanding of how their family member might deteriorate or into the illness of what's actually happening to them. Obviously, we do have a better understanding. So sometimes they might think, well, what are you on about? That's my mum, I know my mum. But to some respects, they become a different person. So when they're with us here, isn't how they would have been when they was at home without the dementia or the Alzheimer's.
When Colin was sectioned, I went to the doctors and they gave me, I can't remember the name of the drug, and it was an antidepressant. And it did help. It wasn't strong. I don't think I took too much. I'm sorry, I can't remember what it was. Once he got in his care home, I was only on it for 6 months. I didn't want to keep taking it because I don't need it, but it did help me through. I'm very happy that he's here because I know that they're looking after him so well. They know him better than I know him. And that doesn't hurt me because it gives me comfort knowing how well he's being looked after. Although I'm not that caregiver anymore, so I support them really in the care that they're giving him.
The hardest part about losing my Opa, I think, was the distance. Living in the UK meant from when I last saw him to when he eventually passed was about a 3-year period, and I wasn't able to go to his funeral. So it was almost, without trying to sound selfish, I haven't really got the closure of it. Which is, yeah, it's made it a lot quite difficult looking back on it. The Three Peaks was very much in mind of what I used to do with my Opa. I don't think there could have been any more of a challenge suited to raising money in memory of him than doing a Three Peaks challenge, which is just climbing mountains.
My grandma, even till like the very, very end, would still like love getting her nails done in the care home, like always. Like a different colour, she'd just be like so happy to just like put a hand out and just like chill and get her nails done. Even though she didn't know who we were or like why we were there, she just still liked doing that, and that's something that she liked having done all the time anyway, even when she was her like full self. So yeah, just try and hold on to those things and try and remember those things as opposed to how they're not themselves anymore.
He recognises me, I think, as a person that comes and hugs and kisses him and sits next to him, but I don't think he recognises or remembers our past together. It was good marriage, and then the years that intervened with his dementia were awful. The last 5 years, I was so stressed, and he used to do awful things, and now that's gone, and we've gone into another period where I love him again. But if you'd have asked me when I was going through the turmoil and him walking out and taking the car out and all the stress that I went through, I wouldn't have said I loved him then. It was just, although I knew it was the disease, but you're still coping with that person that is so difficult.
I would definitely say that I've lost a lot of my dad, but it's about accepting a new dad now. I've lost the dad who used to make me laugh, the dad who my friends used to say if I was having a party, is your dad coming? You know, is Rob coming? Because he was such fun. He was the life and soul of the party. And that's gone, but he's still my dad. And his face still lights up when he sees me. And therefore he's still in there somewhere. I'm not sure he knows my name, but he knows I belong to him and he belongs to me. And that's very, very important.
So we just summited Snowdon. It's our final peak. We finished it in about 25 hours, I think. Just got to get down on the long journey home. I really need a shower.